Greetings and felicitations. This is Michael Haspel. And welcome to Quantum Froth Dispatches. I know it's been a long time. I'm trying to shake the rust off so I can get these out a little bit more frequently this year. But in the meantime, this is one I've been wanting to do for a while. Some months ago, we'll say a couple episodes ago, so I don't sound like I've really neglected it. But a couple months ago, I closed out the Long War podcast with a movie quote, as I normally do. And I used a quote from the film we're going to discuss tonight. And that was Total Recall. And we're talking about the 1990 film, not the remake that was kind of forgettable. This is the cult classic Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And what's really cool is it came out 31 years ago today, assuming that I can get this podcast out before midnight because I'm recording kind of late. But anyway, pretend when you listen to this that it's June 1st, and then it'll be out 31 years ago today in 1990. And we're going to talk about how most of the movie probably didn't happen. So strap in. And let's get your ass to Mars.
Skybird, this is Dropkick with a red dash alpha message in 2 parts. Break.
5, 4, 3, hands on keys, turn.
That's a new one. Blue Sky on Mars. That's the quote I closed out the Long War with. And a lot of people guessed that it came from Total Recall, the 1990 film with starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I made a comment about how, that's the line that tells you that most of the movie did not happen. And a lot of people kind of were surprised in the chat. So I promised that I would do a QFD kind of just talking about why that's the line that gives everything away. But it has occurred to me that since this film is, 31 years old, it's still old. It's still a lot younger than the other movies we've been discussing, which were classics from around 1982. And we're going to get back to that too. I haven't abandoned that theme. We've got Raiders of the Lost Ark to talk about, even though that came out slightly earlier. We've got a bunch of movies to talk about still, about 1982 and the state of pop culture and the state of pop culture today and how Gen X is kind of responsible for all this stuff. I have a bunch of stuff coming for you guys. But tonight, I want to keep this kind of tight and talk about Total Recall. So, but it has occurred to me that since this came out, 31 years ago, there might be a lot of listeners who don't know the movie, haven't seen the movie, or maybe you've only seen I think it came out in 2012, starring, I think it was Colin Farrell. And that movie is based on this movie, but they kind of like lost a lot of the plot elements that I think made this movie a superior film. Now, Total Recall, the 1990 version, is somewhat dated. It is some of the effects are dodgy. Some of them still really hold up. It's amazing that a lot of the mutant effects really hold up with Kuato and stuff like that. But I'm going to give you a brief breakdown, like not really spoiler free. So I should tell you, if somehow you've not seen this film, which is likely. The other day I was talking to a friend of mine, and he had never seen Conan the Barbarian. And I was shocked. I was just like, how have you never seen this movie? How did you not even know this existed? Because he saw a picture of James Earl Jones in full armor, and he was like, what is this? Like, how come I've never seen this? And I was like, man, how do you not know this exists? And I feel kind of bad afterwards because I was just like, how do you not know this movie? And realizing that, hey, that movie is 40 years old. it's like a lot of younger people have not seen this movie. So it's also very likely that a lot of younger people have not seen Total Recall. So here's a brief description of what the movie is kind of about, right? It is based on a short story called We'll Remember It For You Wholesale by Philip K. Dick. And that came out in like 1966. So the movie went through a bunch of iterations. I mean, they were working on it in the 70s. Dan O'Bannon, I think, was working on it, and he set it aside because it was going to be too expensive to make. So he set it aside to work on kind of a monster movie set in space, a monster haunted house movie set in space, and that turned into Alien. So this movie has quite the pedigree. The idea is that this guy named Quaid, he is a construction worker. He is kind of dissatisfied with his life, and he hears about this company called Recall because he can't afford a vacation. And the Recall company will go ahead and implant the memories of a vacation for you for a lot cheaper than actually going on the vacation. So he decides to go down to the Recall office and get a memory implant. And the salesman down there decides to kind of give him an upsell package, right? Because he says, hey, what's always the same every time you go on vacation? You are, right? Wherever you go, there you are. And so it's like, we can actually change your vacation. We can change you on your vacation. And he offers him a package to like be a millionaire playboy or a sports star or an industrial tycoon. There's like one other thing. And the last one is a secret agent, right? So Quaid is like, oh, that sounds really cool. So he picks secret agent. They go to implant the memory of him being a secret agent. And it turns out that he was actually really a secret agent undercover. And they've blown his cover by reactivating his memories of his mission. And he has to go around and go to Mars and kind of find the alien rebel resistance that's fighting this bad guy named Cohagen on there, who's trying to control all the Martian resources. And he winds up discovering an alien artifact and essentially saving the planet and everything. It's a cool action movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle. And it is actually surprisingly more violent than I remembered when I watched it, but it's no surprise it's directed by Paul Verhoeven. And you'll remember him from RoboCop and, of course, Starship Troopers. So this is not a man who shies away from gore. So that is Total Recall in a nutshell. And I would also recommend that you read the story, We'll Remember It For You. It has a surprisingly different ending than the film. The film basically took inspiration, the Recall Corporation, the idea of this guy being a secret agent and his cover being blown or whatever by having the memory implanted. That kind of came from the short story, but really nothing else. I think the name, although in the name, I think the guy's name is Quayle in the story, but they couldn't do that in the 90s because, of course, the vice president was Dan Quayle at the time. So you couldn't do that. So he's Quaid in the movie. Yeah, and that's really kind of a nutshell. So the movie ends with a scene that's kind of interesting. It has a blue sky on Mars and very happy ending. Very kind of bucolic ending to an otherwise very like hard-pressed violent film. So there are really two schools of thought on this, and it's that everything you see in the movie happened as it happened, right? So this guy went to Recall. They went to implant this vacation in there, and it interfered with his cover memory implant, and he really is a secret agent, an agent of Cohagen. And everything you see in the movie actually happens. Or, and this is my thought, that a large portion of the film, if not the entire thing, never happened at all. It's all in Quaid's head. So we're going to kind of explore that, right? So right away, there's some interesting things that happen in the movie. So he's a construction worker. He mentions that he's going to want to go to recall. His one friend kind of talks him out of it, or tries to, and say, hey, a friend of mine went over there and he almost got himself lobotomized because the procedure didn't work correctly. So Quaid decides that he's obsessed about Mars. His wife, Lori, played by Sharon Stone, really doesn't want him blowing money on a vacation, doesn't want him blowing money on the recall procedure or anything like that. She's kind of annoyed with him that he's obsessed about Mars. He goes down there and he talks to this guy, the salesman, Bob McLean. And, oh, by the way, when he's riding on the subway, he sees a commercial for recall. That's one of the things that gives him the idea to go there. And, of course, this will come up later. So that's why I mentioned that. So he goes to the salesman, whose name is Bob McLean, and the salesman starts selling him about, you don't really want to go to Mars. It's kind of boring, right? But he's like, let's recommend one of my Saturn cruises or whatever. And Quaid is like, no, I want to go to Mars. So he's like, okay. So he starts telling him about Mars. And then he says, and this is where the story picks up, right? He says, well, we have an upgrade to our Mars package. That's the ego trip. And he recommends that, hey, you can go as a millionaire playboy and all this stuff and everything. And Quaid picks secret agent. And then they bring him into the room where they're going to implant the memory. And before they've even started anything, right, they're getting stuff set up. And this guy named Ernie, who is one of the lab techs, he's the one that says, that's a new one, Blue Sky on Mars. This is completely unprompted. This is before they've done anything, right? He says that. So theoretically, the movie so far that has happened is all real. It's all real world, with Quaid being a construction worker and going to recall to get his Mars vacation done. So far, everything's real. And Ernie has said already, that's a new one, Blue Sky on Mars. Then the doctor technician that is going to do the procedure injects him in the neck with some kind of tranquilizer, and Quaid starts to go under very rapidly. At that point, she starts questioning him about what kind of women he's attracted to. Like, she asks his sexual orientation and then what kind of women he's attracted to. And if you see in the movie, you remember the line. He says sleazy and then changes his mind and says demure. And he also specifies that he's attracted to brunettes. Now, it's interesting because Lori, of course, played by Sharon Stone, is a blonde. So on the screen, as Quaid is going under, he's kind of going in and out of consciousness at this point. He sees Melina on the screen. That is played by Rachel Ticotin. And, what's interesting about that is, of course, when he gets to Mars later, he meets Melina, who is exactly the woman he described. She's sleazy, she's demure, she's athletic, she's a brunette. And he saw her face. That's the last thing he sees, is her face on the monitor as he passes out, and he hears the lab tech say, he's not going to want to come back. This guy's going to have such a good time. He's not going to want to come back. Right? So that's when I think the entire thing starts. Right? And it's like that from that moment on, for sure, everything is not real. It's a dream. It's the memory implant. So the next thing that happens in the film, though, is that Quaid basically starts to freak out. And the doctors are trying to hold him down. The lab techs, they call in the salesman, and they're like, he's having a schizoid embolism. He's going to be lobotomized, all this stuff. And meanwhile, Quaid is screaming, you blew my cover, right? And the salesman turns to the lab tech and says, he's not not doing anything. He's just living out his ego trip. This is part of the ego trip. It's a malfunction of the recall process. And the lab tech answers, it can't be because we haven't implanted it yet. And so they drug him and they throw him in a cab. And from then on, he's kind of working this secret agent thing. He runs into his friends, and his friends all turn out to be double agents that were sent to keep an eye on him. When he gets home, Lori is there, only Lori is also some kind of sleeper agent, and she attacks him, right? And he has to fight her off, and he eventually makes his way to Mars. The whole story and everything plays out pretty much the way the salesman told him. Because when the salesman was selling him on the ego trip, he said, look, I don't want to spoil it for you, but rest assured, by the time the trip is over, you get the girl, you kill the bad guys, and you save the whole planet. And that's exactly what happens from that moment on, right? So that's, again, proof that it's all a dream, that it didn't really happen. So then when he gets to, he's involved in Mars doing all this thing, and Ronnie Cox plays the villain, by the way, Cohagen, and you'll know him because you've seen him in like Beverly Hills Cop. He was the corporate bad guy in RoboCop. He's really solid character actor. The other really awesome character actor that's in this is Michael Ironside, who is like playing one of the henchmen, one of Cohagen's henchmen, but he's really still playing kind of Ham Tyler from V. he's kind of still the same guy. He's even wearing the same jacket, I think, or at least it looks like he is. But anyway, Quaid is creating all kinds of problems and everything for Cohagen. So all of a sudden he's in his hotel, and this guy shows up, and it's Dr. Edgemore, right? And Dr. Edgemore is basically like one of the guys from Recall. And he comes in and he tells Doug that, hey, they've inserted him in his dream so that he can try to talk him out into waking up because the recall procedure has gone wrong. And Doug Quaid is trapped in the recall procedure. And so they've sent Dr. Edgemore in. And Edgemore is played by Roy Brocksmith, and you'll remember him. I guess the best role that I remember him as is in the TNG episode Peak Performance. He was the Stratagema master that was like playing Data and beat Data, and Data was all perplexed. And Picard had that really famous quote of, it's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That's not a weakness. That's life. That was that episode. So anyway, Edgemore comes in and he tells Quaid that, you're going to suffer a schizoid embolism and be lobotomized, but you need to wake up, right? And one of the things that they have for him to wake up is his wife, Lori, has come all the way, and it's like, look, Lori's here. She didn't want to travel to Mars, so this is a dream because she's here. She's in your dream too. We've inserted both of us to go in and get you to wake up. And he almost has Quaid convinced. Quaid is just like, okay, I kind of believe that this is a dream and I need to wake up. And they give him a little pill, and he's like, what is this pill? And they're like, in your dream, you'll just fall asleep, but this is a symbol to your subconscious that you want to wake up. And as he takes the pill and he's about to swallow it, and he sees that Dr. Edgemore is sweating. So he goes, well, why would a dream, image of some doctor be sweating? Because I have a gun to his head. He shouldn't even be worried at all. So he winds up killing Dr. Edgemore, right? And fighting his wife again. There's actually a pretty good fight between Melina and Lori in that scene. It's actually pretty cool. But one of the interesting things about that is that I don't think that Cohagen, as powerful as he was, would be powerful enough to get Dr. Edgemore from Earth and bring him all the way to Mars to go talk Quaid out of it, right? To talk Quaid down into taking this pill so that they could subdue him. So I think that for the most part, Dr. Edgemore is telling the truth. And the reason I think that is because Dr. Edgemore is in the recall commercial that Quaid sees on the subway when he gets the idea to go to recall. He sees Dr. Edgemore is the one who's doing the commercial for recall. So it suffices to say that he probably would not get on a transport to head to Mars just to talk Quaid out of it. He's probably in a lab at recall going, oh no, this thing has gone wrong, and this guy is stuck in his fake memory / dream, and so he's had himself inserted. And I think at that point, that is the real Lori. That is also Quaid's actual wife coming in there. Now, once he kills the doctor, his subconscious takes over again, and she reverts to being the villain wife that he had as a spy. Because as long, if he's supposed to be kind of loyal to his wife, he can't be hanging out with Melina. But if his wife is a bad guy that his, subconscious is adding in, then it kind of gives him a blank slate to do whatever guilt-free. So the other interesting thing about that scene is that Dr. Edgemore describes the rest of the plot of the movie perfectly. He says, he says something along the lines of, your reality is going to begin to fall apart. 1 second, you're going to be like the savior of the planet. Then you're going to be Cohagen's bosom buddy. And then you're going to be dealing with alien civilizations. And that is the rest of the movie from that point on, like to a T. Those are the beats of the rest of the movie. Is he's viewed as kind of the savior of the planet, head of the resistance, and then it's revealed that his alter ego, Hauser, who is supposed to be the secret agent that he is actually one of Cohagen's best friends. Cohagen even invites him and Melina to a party after they're supposed to get their memories restored and hers wiped. And then, of course, at the end of the film, he finds this whole alien pyramid with a nuclear reactor or some kind of fusion reactor that has terraforming equipment that's going to fix Mars. So all of that happens exactly to a T. So it's Dr. Edgemore knows how the story is going to end, and he just tells Quaid that, right? And at the very end of the movie, he activates the fusion reactor. They go out and they actually get blown out onto the onto the surface of Mars, and the lack of atmosphere starts to create him. He starts to kind of swell up, and his eyes are bulging out of his head and everything. But then the terraforming equipment activates and restores kind of atmospheric pressure and oxygen, and he and Melina are fine. They wind up standing up. Looking at the Martian surface without any spacesuits or anything. And there's a blue sky on Mars. And then she said, it's so beautiful it could be a dream. And he's like, it seems kind of like it, or something like that. And then she says, well, hurry up and kiss me before you wake up. And then, tellingly, most movies, almost all the movies, at the end fade to black. Total Recall fades to white. Why? Because Quaid has completed the program and he's waking up. So the whole thing is a dream. But there's a couple things that throw a wrench in that, right? So the movie begins with him and Melina on the surface of Mars. Oh, but wait, how can he be dreaming about Melina? He's actually dreaming at the beginning there. He wakes up and he's at home with Sharon Stone, with Lori. But it's like, how can he be with Melina if he hasn't kind of met her yet, right? Because he doesn't really see Melina until the recall techs pull her up on the screen, like after his description of his ideal woman. So how could he be dreaming about her at the beginning of the movie? Well, I think the easy answer is that he did dream about her at the beginning of the movie, and she's a subconscious projection of his. So when he starts to describe his ideal woman, he's already been injected by the recall techs by that tranquilizer. So he's already going under. And what he sees on the monitor, I think, isn't what's actually on the monitor. It's his subconscious. He's already dreaming. It's his subconscious projection on there. And then, folks will bring up, well, how come we get to see what Cohagen and Michael Ironside are doing when Hauser's not there or Quaid's not there, right? And I'm like, well, that's storytelling. You could have told the story entirely from Quaid's point of view, and it might have been an interesting kind of film that way. But I don't think it would have worked in the Hollywood of 1990. So they still needed a kind of traditional movie. So you need the scenes with the villain kind of plotting and those beats. And you also have the infamous 2 weeks scene, where Arnold is in disguise as this woman. And it's a great visual effects gag where, her kind of body comes apart to reveal that Arnold's kind of in the middle of it. There's a bunch of other little Easter eggs throughout, like when Arnold goes through, if he was a spy the whole time, if the movie is real, right? He has to go through this like X-ray, kind of like a TSA kind of thing, in his daily job, right? So he walks right through it, and it never sets off the detectors that there's any foreign objects. You can just see like people's skeletons walking by. But later in the movie, it's revealed that Quaid / Hauser has a tracking device planted in his head, and he has to go through this pretty ordealing procedure to pull this thing out. And it is metal. It looks like a little bullet, but that never showed up on the X-rays when he was walking through things. So that's another sign that, that wasn't real. And there's actually another possibility too, and the possibility is that the entire movie is a dream. That Quaid never went to recall, never went to any of this stuff and everything. He never woke up. He is dreaming from the beginning of the movie all the way to the end, and he wakes up at the end. So that's less satisfying than anything else. But it's just kind of, that's why I mentioned that line. And I know I took like 30 minutes to talk about it, but that's why I mentioned that line. That's a new one, Blue Sky on Mars, and why Total Recall is, all in Quaid's head, that the movie didn't happen. Now, there's a funny aside. When I was just revisiting the movie and stuff like that, for this, I ran into this by Paul Verhoeven, right? So you would think, like, if somebody knows whether or not it's a dream or if it's real, it would be Paul Verhoeven. And he gave an interview, and he says this. Total Recall doesn't say whether it's reality or it is a dream. It's really saying that this reality and there's that reality, and both exist at the same time. Because you look at Total Recall, there's never a preference, let's say, taken by me or the scriptwriter to say this is really what he dreams about and this is the truth. So he's like, I wanted it to be that way because I felt that it was, if you want to use a very big word, postmodern. I felt that basically I should not say this is true and this is not true. I wanted, and we worked with Gary Goldman on that, not the original writers, but we worked very hard to make both consistent and that both would be true. And I think we succeeded very well. So if you think, of course, that there's no solution, hey, it's both true. So there's two realities. So according to Verhoeven, if you think that it was just a dream, you're right. And if you're thinking that the whole movie really happened, you're right too. So it is kind of postmodern. And on that note, I'm going to leave you, and hopefully we'll have another QFD, like not, 6 months apart. So I will see you next time. Mike out. You have been listening to Quantum Froth Dispatches by Michael Haspel. Music and other cues are brought to you by The Fat Rat. The song you are hearing is Monody, featuring Laura Brehm. Thank you for listening, and we now return you to your mundane reality.